All right, welcome to today's training. We're going to go through the exclusive right to buy as well as the exclusive right to sell. A little different than Jesse's class. We're going to go through it and I'm going to articulate it in a manner in which I review it with my clients. So this isn't a video to help you fill out the form. There's other videos for that and there's Jesse's class. This is for you to understand it in layman's terms, ask me questions. This is exactly how I go through it with my buyer. Um, so I think what we'll do is we'll kind of role play and I'm going to go through it exactly how I go through it. If anybody has any questions, stop me as if you were a buyer. So I'm not going to pick on one person to role play with me. Just speak up, interrupt me, ask that question. So what you guys will understand is that I know the contracts and all the clauses pretty much to a T, but I do not go and I do not explain every single clause in every single way. I wait for somebody to ask me more of a detailed question around a certain clause before I go into the full detail. And I've done this a lot in my career, and I used to go through it line by line almost. And honestly, people just gloss over. They want to know the layman's terms. That's why they're hiring us. It's just like if I have like a legal document and I read through it and I have questions about it, I hire an attorney to interpret it for me. That's kind of what we're doing. And so the better you get at this, the more the easier it will be to have people sign. The more that you know what you're committing to, and so let's just go through it here and you'll see how simple I make it, but yet how easy I make it on the person to be able to commit with me, right? I'm most likely just going to use the person's face that I see. Carson, you always pop up right below me. I don't know why. Um, so Carson, man, I appreciate you jumping on Zoom. I appreciate you taking a look at this with me. I'm excited to get started with you, right? You always want to reiterate that you are excited, that you thanking them for going through the process with you. It really speaks volumes with whatever you're doing with your buyer or seller. So before we get started, Carson, what you're going to notice is that this contract is primarily have black letters and some things are in blue. What we're going to really pay attention to is the blue. That is all the things that I could enter into the contract. You see, and whoa, I just messed up. I don't even call this thing a contract. That's step one. You see, everything in blue is what I've entered into loyalty agreement, Carson. This loyalty agreement is a boilerplate form that's developed by a bunch of attorneys down at the Real Estate Commission. And so we're only allowed to change and manipulate a few things in accordance to what we're looking for you. So let's get started. First and foremost, I have selected buyer's agency. What that means is that I will be your coach in the game versus a referee. And what that means is I can talk strategy, negotiate with you, and do all of those things. If I was a transaction broker, I'd be the referee. I know the game, I interpret the rules, but I don't strategize with you. I don't call the plays. That would be on you. So I think it's in our best interest for me to represent you as a buyer's agent. So that way we can negotiate and strategize and work together to get you into a home. Does that make sense? Great. Next, I do work for a multiple person firm called Keller Williams. That's where I hang my license. And so again, make sure that your names are spelled correctly, you and your wife. We really want to make sure, Carson, that your name is spelled the way you're going to sign and take title. So a lot of people, what they do is they'll kind of copy what's down on their driver's license. As you can see, Carson, I'm just going to say your wife. Your wife is using her full middle name and you're using your middle initial. Perfectly acceptable. If you guys have clients that have like, John Smith, you need to probably spell out the middle name because it's so common. Even if you just put John P. Smith, I am going to guess the lender and you as the or I should say the buyer in general is going to want to spell out John Peter Smith. And it's for their own protection because if there's another John P. Smith in this world, you don't want them to show their ID and claim that they own that house. And you're also John P. Smith and you own that house, right? And some of that stuff goes on. There's a lot of scammers out there. But full middle name is best. Middle initial is acceptable. And some people, I mean, they don't even have a middle name because their first and last name are so far out of normal, right? So make sure you explain that to your clients. The last thing you want to do is sign a bunch of contracts and execute a bunch of things, and then the lender doesn't like it. So a lot of times I've used what the lender uses on their lender letter or what's on their driver's license. Great, let's move on. Like I said, Keller Williams. My name is Bruce Carley. Carson, the property that you're finding today, we're not sure what that place looks like, right? And your criteria could change. So rather than type in all of that, I'm going to say this is to be determined. This loyalty agreement begins today and will end in about 3 months. So you guys, in this market, if I'm working with a buyer, I'm probably going to sign this thing for about 6 months. My script is 3 months because in a normal market, that's pretty much all I do. But in this market, I usually do about 6 months. With a listing agreement, I'll usually do about 3 to 4 months because it should sell pretty quickly. But it's up to you. I know some people do a year, some people do 6 months, 8 months. You guys do your business. I think the best rule of thumb is to do a year. That way, if certain circumstances change or happen, you at least have that to continue that process down the road and don't have to re-execute. Carson, you're going to see this clause in a lot of different things that we use. It's called the computation period of days. And what that states is if any dates or deadlines fall on a weekend or holiday, I like them to proceed to the next business day. Section 4, brokerage relationship. This is where it kind of explains to you that I'm your coach in the game and not necessarily a referee. But I do have a couple of ways that I can, represent you, and I really want you to understand that. So take a look at section 4 and let me know if you have any questions as you go through. As you can see, there's nothing I have marked or selected in here. So it's, again, all of the black ink is in boilerplate form. So read through there, let me know if you have any questions, and we'll go from there. Kind of similar to section 5 and 6. 5 and 6 is exactly what I should be doing for you throughout this contract. You see, I am your fiduciary duty through this, and I'm going to guide you in my most professional way. And so if you ever feel like I'm telling you something that you don't agree with, I need you to raise your hand. I need you to call me out. I need you to understand exactly why we're doing what we're doing, because the last thing that we need each other to do, Carson, is butt heads. You see, I'm on your side. My goal is to get you into a property. In a selfish way, Carson, I do not get paid until we close. So there will be no hiding properties from you. You're going to see exactly what your criteria has, and I'm going to show you all homes, right? I'm also going to call you out. I'm going to call you out on properties that you may want to see that I feel don't match your criteria. For instance, if you tell me you need a 4-bedroom home and you tell me that's a non-negotiable, but you want to see a house that has 3 bedrooms, I'm going to question why. It's okay if your criteria changes, but my job is to get you into a home. My job is to not show you 50 homes. Does that make sense? Great. Read through sections 5 and 6 and let me know if you have any questions, but this is what I'll be doing for you all the time. If I'm not doing something in here, call me out. I pride myself on what I do and how I get you into a home. And I can assure you that I hit all these bullet points. Let's go down here to section 7. Little conversation about how I get paid. You see, like I said at our buyer's consultation, the sellers 98% of the time are willing to pay my commissions, but the other 2% of the time they may not be willing to pay my commissions, and we're going to have to do one of two things. So sometimes it's a for sale by owner, or sometimes it's a discounted listing brokerage firm. You see, there are some minimum things that I have to pay for: taxes, business expenses, brokerage fees. I don't pocket every single dollar that you may see me get as far as a commission goes. And so I do have a base standard for my business. I'm going to change this for the sake of the video. So this buyer that I'm showing you guys is a real live buyer. This is how I fill out a contract for a builder. So this builder is Richmond Homes. They dropped their commissions from 2.8 to 2.0. And so I had to modify this because I wasn't going to charge my client the extra 8% or the 0.8%. But know that you can, and I could have, but I don't do that in my business. 2% on 600,000 was just fine. So that's why you see this amended. But for the sake of this video, I would say that 98% of all of my listing agreements say 2.5 plus. All right. So a little different situation just because these guys bought a new build and there was no way the builder was going to pay me. So Carson, I accept 2.5% and above. So what that means, Carson, is if somebody wants to pay me less than 2.5%, I'm going to tell you that we're going to go into negotiation. I can't tell you that I'm going to make you pay the difference, but I'm going to do one of two things. If we can't come to an agreement, I'm going to just release you from this contract and have you work with that seller. You see, my job is to help the general public, and it's not me helping the general public if I'm greedy. So if you want that house and they're not paying what's acceptable to me and my brokerage, I'm just going to go ahead and release you to that seller. But if you want representation, then we need to talk about how we can bring up that difference in commissions. Does that make sense? Great.
Yep.
Now, in the history of me doing this, Carson, and you guys pay attention to this line, because you guys can use this. I don't care if you have no transactions or 100 transactions. In the history of me doing this, Carson, I have never not had a seller pay my commissions. Right? You can say it with 0 transactions or 100. It helps put your sellers at ease when you talk about this, or your buyers at ease when you talk about this section. So as you can see, the rest of section 7 is pretty much left blank. I don't charge any hidden fees, admin fees, hourly rates, retainer fees. I don't do any of that. I believe that I need to work for my commission, and that commission is paid at closing. So I don't charge you anything throughout this contract to go see homes and go under contract and maybe fall apart. Section 7.3, you're going to see in here that I have marked in that the listing brokerage firm or seller may pay, but the buyer is obligated to pay. The reason why I put it in there that you're obligated to pay, Carson, is because if we do get a seller who's willing to pay, let's call it 1.5%, because you're on the hook to pay the difference of the 1%, this gives me the ability to ask the seller to bring up that difference on your behalf. Right? So if we do run into a situation where the seller's not willing to pay my full commission, by marking section 7.3.1, this allows me in the contract for the home to ask the seller to pay my entire commission on your behalf. Now, like I said, that doesn't happen very often. It happens less than 2% of the time. And in the history of me doing this, I have never, ever, ever had to have a buyer pay me a cent to have me represent them on a contract. Any questions so far?
Does that make, so if you marked 7.3.3 where they're not obligated to pay, you couldn't negotiate that? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. Yes. Good question, Carson. Let's talk about that. So if you guys saw, I changed that real quick. Like I said, this buyer was a different situation. But I will select 7.3.1. And the reason why you select it is because if you select 7.3.3, and the seller is only willing to pay 1.5%, and you want at least 2.5, you cannot ask the seller to pay you that difference if you have 7.3.3 selected. And here's why. The contract is between the buyer and the seller. And so you cannot, as an agent, put something into a contract that's for your financial gain. See, when you have section 7.3.1 selected and you ask the seller to pay your commission, it's for the buyer's financial gain because they're on the hook for it. That's the difference. If you learn how to articulate that and you practice it over and over again, I never really have a buyer bat an eye at it. Every now and then you get somebody that bats an eye at it. Any questions so far about any of it? We're about halfway through this thing. You guys see how easy I make it? I group everything together. Hey, look, I don't charge any retainer fees, hourly fees. I don't go and sit here and say, hey, I don't charge any hourly fees. Hey, I don't do any. You just loop it in, get it going and get it down to about 15, 20 minutes. Okay. Section 7.4, holdover period. Carson, what this means is if I present you or show you any properties that you may want to make an offer on and pursue, and this contract expires, we'll actually have 60 days left where I can continue to work with you on maybe said property, right? That's what the holdover period is. It just means that it holds itself over in case you want to go buy a property after this thing has expired, in which I've already sent you. Cool. Limited on third-party compensation. You see, throughout this contract and throughout this process, I'm going to recommend professionals to you. But I'm going to recommend professionals to you, one, because they get the job done, and two, because they're professionals. But I'm not recommending people to you because I get any sort of kickbacks. You see, in Section 8, it actually says it's illegal. So if I recommend my inspector to you and you pay $500, just know that there's no such thing as a $25 gift card for my business to him. I'm referring you because I want to get you to the closing table. And Section 8 is where you can be assured that I'm not receiving any sort of kickbacks from anybody that might be referred to you during this process. All right. Buyer's obligation to broker, right? This is an obligation for both of us, right? A lot of people think that you're signing a contract for me. I call this a loyalty agreement, right? We're going to be loyal to each other. And so Section 9 commits you to me, and it's saying, Carson, you're not working with another agent. You don't have anybody else set up on a property search, do you?
Nope.
Great. Well, Carson, let's pretend that you did. Let's pretend that you're not working with another agent, but another agent is sending you properties to the MLS. Okay, Carson, no problem. I'm going to put it over here that you are receiving a list of submitted properties pursuant to the previous listing agreement with another broker. But you're out of that contract with that other agent, correct?
Yeah.
Great.
I'm out of it.
What I'm going to need you to do, Carson, is I'm going to need you to put a halt on that MLS search. And here's why. I'm going to set you up with a search with that same email. And now the system is not going to understand what broker should be sending you listings. So I'm going to need you to go ahead and send that other broker an email or a text message asking them to take you off of that listing, or you can go ahead and unsubscribe from that broker, but that convolutes things. Please don't do that because we have to go through the system and I have to get you to sign a form and all of this stuff. So go ahead and ask that broker to take you off that list. If they refuse to, you can unsubscribe, but go ahead and just ask them to.
Will do.
You guys see how that works? Right? A lot of people are set up with searches from other agents. A lot of buyers don't know if they've signed this. A lot of agents will just send this over to a buyer expecting them to sign. I want you guys to understand that if you get a buyer to sign this and they can prove that you didn't review this with them, then you are in breach of your job. In Section 5 and 6, you're already at a breach of what you should be doing. Okay. Again, Carson, this is a loyalty agreement. This is a commitment between you and I to work together. And Section 10 says that if I'm not, or I'm sorry, Section 10.1 says that if I'm not in my job, you have every right to let me go. But again, in Section 10.2, Carson, it says that if you're not a reasonable buyer and I deem that you're just pulling my chain and pulling one over on me, I get to release you as well. Now we need to release each other in a written form. So if I'm not doing my job, shoot me a text, send me an email. Make sure you save it, and I need to do the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes,
Perfect.
It does.
You guys see that? I just told my client how to get out of this contract with me. I want to put them at ease. I will not work with somebody who does not want to work with me. I'm not that agent. I've seen a lot of other agents kind of gloss over this, and it's perfectly fine to. You can say, hey, read through Section 10. This shows us exactly, what we need to be doing for each other and what happens if we don't. That's how some people explain it. I literally give my buyer that out right here. It's a psychological thing because since I gave them that out, watch what happens when I go to make them sign, right? If Carson says, hey, Bruce, I just don't know if I feel comfortable signing this thing. Oh, really? Tell me why. Well, I don't want this to commit this to me. What if you're not the right agent for me? Blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, that's why in Section 10.1, it says, if I'm not the right agent for you, you just send me an email or a text message and I'll release you from this contract. You see, I can't hold the public to work with somebody that they don't want to work with, but this does protect both of us as we work together. So go ahead and sign here, Carson. So that's why I do it, and that's why I teach you guys to do it that way. I've only ever had one person fire me, and that was the last time I've ever had a person fire me, because now I fire people, right? You get to understand the limitations that you have in your business, and it's perfectly acceptable to release somebody from this contract because they're a bad apple. They're a bad buyer. They constantly see the right home and never make an offer, right? That's not me working with them fiduciary, and that's not them being a reasonable buyer. So I can release it. Section 11, cost of services or products obtained from outside sources. As you go throughout this contract, and as you go throughout this this deal, Carson, every single service provider that you interact with should or will give you a breakdown of their cost. And what I mean by that is when I refer you to inspectors, you're able to ask them what that inspection is going to charge, what they're going to charge. They're going to ask you a few questions, but they must disclose it to you. Same thing with the lender. They need to give you a cost estimate on the loan. If anything changes drastically, they need to submit to you another cost estimate on the loan. Before closing, you're going to get what's called a settlement statement, and that's going to give you all of the cost breakdown to the penny. So that's what happens throughout this contract, and that's what the law states that has to be done. So if you ever hire anybody throughout this transaction, they must disclose to you their cost if you ask. So go ahead and ask. Brokerage services, showing homes. We went over that in our buyer's presentation. So again, as we go out and see properties, take as much time as you need in the properties that you like. But please do myself and you a favor, Carson. If there's a property that you walk into and you don't like and you're never going to make an offer on it, please let's move on. There's no reason to see the house, because if you start to see the house that you're not going to make an offer on, you start to mix up the bedrooms and bathrooms in this house and that house. So we only want to stay in homes that you actually are liking. Does that make sense? Great. Disclosure of buyer's identity. I have in here that we do not have your permission to disclose your identity. Sometimes you guys, I just put does. Hey, we do have your permission to let the title company know your full name. We don't need to hide you as an alias. You're not a celebrity or a famous person, a rich millionaire, those types of things. So that's what disclosure of buyer's identity means. Section 14, disclosure of settlement service costs. Kind of like what I was saying in section 11, cost of services. You're going to have to pay for these third parties. They must disclose what their settlement cost is to you. So if you hire that inspector, it'll be you that calls that inspector to engage their services for your inspection of your home. I'll work with the inspector to get them into the home, but you're going to be the one that pays them directly. Wire and other frauds, right? When it comes down to the financial piece of things, Carson, please don't be changing any money and doing anything and answering any emails that say send this amount of money to any place. As we go throughout this contract, if anybody asks you to wire or send money in any way, shape, or form, you need to get on the phone with me, the lender, or the title company to validate whether that's correct. Carson, I just learned of somebody over in Greeley who wired $200,000 to the wrong account and it's gone. They can't get it back. And I really want to scare you with that, Carson, because it happens, and it's not going to happen on my watch, because you're going to let me know if somebody asks you for money, correct? Great. Removal of marketing material. Buyer acknowledges that the marketing material used by the seller and the seller's broker may be difficult, if not impossible, to remove. So Carson, as you go throughout this, you are going to look at homes online, meaning you're going to see addresses and photos and personal effects in properties. When you close on that home, I can't guarantee that all of those photos get removed. Is that okay with you?
Yep.
Perfect. And if you say it's not, Carson, if it's not okay with you, my friend, I'm going to have a really hard time understanding exactly how we're going to get you into a home that's not forthcoming on the internet in order for you to see it, in order for you to go and like it. Now, I do have a little bit of a workaround, Carson, but it's not guaranteed. So if you do not want any of that stuff online, I need you to tell me now, because what happens is once we go under contract and we're about 3 or 4 days away from closing, I can tell the listing agent to remove all of the photos and a lot of the details And then once that is saved, it takes 3 or 4 days. It should publish to all these other websites. And then once the home is marked as closed, then it'll just show that the home was sold for XYZ, and it'll probably say an address and maybe one photo of the exterior. But again, that's not guaranteed. So is that okay with you?
Yep.
Cool. Non-discrimination. So I can't discriminate based upon anything, Carson. And so what that means is you may ask me how the neighborhood is, what's the crime rate, how good are the schools? Those are all opinion-based questions. You see, discrimination is really an opinion-based thing. And so if you have any questions that I can't answer, I'm going to absolutely have the resources or the know-how to get you the answer you're looking for. For instance, if you're worried about schools and school ratings, I'm gonna educate you to go to greatschools.org and then make your interpretation based upon their rating system. Recommendation of legal and tax counsel. Like I said, I'm able to practice limited law with my license. However, limited law means that it's limited. I can only practice what our Colorado Real Estate Commission has provided for me and that I've taken trainings on. You see, Carson, in my career, I've had a lot of people ask me to interpret title commitments and public records and inspection reports, or I should say estimates for contracting. You see, the way legal people word different things outside of my scope, I'm going to have to refer you to that person. So if we have any questions on the title commitment, I can't interpret that for you. I need you to talk to the title company. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes perfect sense.
So what that means is you have the right to take this contract and any contract that you have involved in this transaction to a legal or tax counsel for review, and it's perfectly your right. Should we butt heads, Carson? Should you fire me and I don't think you should? Or should I fire you and I don't think you should, or you don't think I should? What we would do is we'd go into mediation before we go to the courts. I've never had it happen, and honestly, there's no financial piece to our relationship at this point. And so, but if that happens, we agree to go to mediation instead of the courts. Any attorney fees. So I like to read this aloud. In the event of any arbitration or litigation relating to the buyer listing contract, the arbiter or the court must award the prevailing party all reasonable costs and expenses, including attorney and legal fees. So please, if we're going to execute mediation with myself, or this mediation clause is also in the contract for the home, just know that a lot of times, if you're not awarded that piece, you'll be paying for the other party's attorney fees. So I just want to make you aware of that as well. Additional provisions. We don't have any additional provisions. I know it says it in there. That's just a team clause, guys. No attachments, no nothing else. Please let me know as you read through this if you guys have any questions about this. A couple of pieces with these last little clauses in here. At any time, ask me for another copy of this contract. Perfectly fine. This agreement isn't executed until both you and I sign this. Kind of like discrimination, Megan's Law says that, if you're worried about registered sex offenders, you're going to need to go to the registered sex offenders website or the county municipality police website and find out that information. Once this contract is signed, we can't modify it. If we do modify it, we need to do it in the form of an amend extend in which both of us need to agree to it. Any questions? Great. Sign here. Let's move forward. Questions before I end this recording, and then we'll jump into the listing. No questions. Fantastic.